When I say the title, The Exorcist, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it the term satanic panic? Or maybe a scene from the movie, like the one where Reagan projectile vomits Nickelodeon gack? For me, it was that picture of Reagan everyone used as a jump scare in the early days of the internet. That picture is burned into the back of my retinas. My dad swears he doesn't remember doing this, but I swear I remember him doing this. Now, of course, it wasn't funny at the time, but it's super funny now, and I guarantee it's going to be familiar to at least, like, two of you. So, essentially, what he did was he called me to the family computer. This is pre divorce. So, I was pretty young, maybe 7 or 8. He told me to try and find the differences between two pictures. I squinted so hard. They were both of a kitchen, I think, some kind of interior room. Well, sure enough, I stare for a long enough time, and then Reagan makes her appearance. I run into the other room crying, my dad laughs, and then the housing market bursts, and it's 2008, and I get to have 2 Christmases.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
Like, growing up, The Exorcist had this kind of legendary status to it. My dad was, I think, in college when it came out, and he'd tell us about the cultural impact he saw. One of his friends supposedly read it and had to put it down about halfway through, and even a month after was reporting having nightmares. He talked about people fainting in the theaters when the movie came out. At one point, he even had a brief discussion at work about it with like a different coworker, and his boss pulled him aside to tell him that just talking about it would invite demons into your body and soul, and that he should just be careful about it. And so, for the last 20 years, it's been in the back of my mind, festering, marinating, fermenting. I've never been one to watch horror movies. I'm too much of a chicken shit. I am utterly, utterly terrified. I panic, I jump, I scream. It's pathetic. But The Exorcist, as you know, is not just a movie. It started as a book. So as I go through a renaissance in my late 20s and into my 30s, spending more time reading and investing, especially in horror lit, I've rediscovered that having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card. In fact, the library fucking rules. And if you disagree, you suck, and I don't want to know you. So, I checked The Exorcist out from the local library, beginning my plunge into what, at one point in time, may have been considered the most evil and disgusting book out there. When I started the book, I kind of had the expectation that this would be like a lot of old horror media. Horrifying at the time, only kind of scary in 2026. And that is kind of what it was like for the first third of the book. It does not stay that way. I'm going to say up front that some very, very messed up things happen, and they happen mostly to a 12-year-old girl. This is your content warning. This novel features a lot of bodily fluids, physical and sexual harm, heavy drug use and abuse, and probably some more shit that I'm forgetting. There's also going to be a lot of plot points, as you can imagine, that involve actions that are disrespectful to Christianity. Don't know why that would be your breaking point after the other stuff I mentioned, but I figured I'd mention it. I'm not here to judge. I also am a believer in not censoring myself or William Peter Blatty. Any censoring in this video will be done at the discretion of YouTube and not myself. I know I can't read all of the passages I would want for YouTube, but I also really don't want to censor my words or William Peter Blatty's words. These stories have merit, so what I'm choosing to read is unchanged, just kind of like chopped up. If any of that is something you're not comfortable hearing about, or it'll compromise your mental health, now is the time to back out. This is also the last stop for people who don't want The Exorcist spoiled for them. Go read it and come back. Or consider the fact that it's a 70-year-old book. Or not, Jesus. It came out in the 70s. Okay, alright. It's old. It's not that old. Is everyone else here good? Okay. Time to go into the plot of The Exorcist. What I'm about to do has not been approved by the Vatican. The prologue details a trip that Father Lancaster Marin is wrapping up. He's been in northern Iraq on a dig, and he finds a statuette of Pazuzu, and he's mentally preparing himself to return to the States where he anticipates having to do battle against this being. Now, just as a side note, Pazuzu was a real god in ancient Mesopotamia. He was both good and bad. The general overview that I understood from the Wikipedia page that I read is that he was sometimes seen as a violent wind, and then sometimes he was a protector against another goddess named Lamashtu. Essentially, like, he would blow away Lamashtu, which was important for babies and pregnant people because she really hated them, I guess. I don't know why. This is like literally just like a cliff notes of a Wikipedia article. But just so you know, Pazuzu was a real figure, and as far as I can tell, not at all accurately portrayed in this book. It kind of seems like William Peter Blatty like saw the name Pazuzu and was like, yoink! But anyway, it's like he was like a real thing. Anyway, Father Marin is like all sad, and he has a lot of bad feelings about Pazuzu, and he's going back to the US. This guy will not show up again until much, much later. Just keep him in the back of your mind. The bulk of The Exorcist follows Chris MacNeil, a single mom who works 2 jobs. No, sorry, wrong redhead. Chris MacNeil is a single mom, but she currently only has 1 job, which is being an actress. She and her 12-year-old daughter Reagan are living in Washington, D.C. to film a movie for director Burke Dennings. Chris, however, does want a second job. She's been trying to get into directing, and an opportunity arises for her to make that happen. Unfortunately, shit hits the fan and the pants, and not just the readers. Despite Chris being a single mom, she also has a considerable amount of help. There's a married Swiss couple, Carl and Willie, who are the housekeepers. Sharon is her secretary and doubles as Reagan's tutor. To be fair, if I was a successful actress and my ex-husband was off in Europe on a yacht, such a shithead that he couldn't even bother to call his daughter on her birthday, I'd also hire help. Actually, I would just hire help if I had the funds. The other main player in The Exorcist is Father Damien Karras. We see a single short chapter from his perspective in this first part. Father Karras is a psychiatrist as well as a priest, so he's traveling to Manhattan to deliver a speech on a paper he wrote. Then he goes to visit his mother while he's in town, and the picture that is painted here is just horribly depressing. He's the son of an immigrant, an older woman whose speaking English is very broken, who can't read or write English. Her apartment and even the building itself is falling apart completely. Children sit on the stoop in ill-fitting clothes. There's rust in the sink and the tub. The floors are soiled. His mother is living on Social Security and maybe a few dollars a month from one of his uncles, her brothers. Despite her obvious joy at Karras coming to visit, he knows that she spends the majority of her days staring out the window. It is made abundantly clear that Father Karras is drowning in both guilt and doubt. He feels he's guilty for leaving his mother alone in this shithole apartment, as well as the joyful way she greets him when he visits, despite the reality of her life. And he's filled with doubt by what he sees as an absence of God, the many terrible things happening around him with seemingly no intervention from God. After getting home, he briefly admits this to the provincial, but it doesn't go anywhere immediately. A harried man with many appointments, the provincial had not pressed him for the reasons for his doubt, for which Karras was grateful. He knew that his answers would have sounded insane. The need to rend food with the teeth and then defecate. My mother's 9 First Fridays, stinking socks, thalidomide babies, an item in the paper about a young altar boy waiting at a bus stop set on by strangers, sprayed with kerosene, ignited. No, too emotional, vague, existential. More rooted in logic was the silence of God. In the world, there was evil, and much of the evil resulted from doubt, from an honest confusion among men of goodwill. Would a reasonable God refuse to end it? Not reveal himself? Not speak? Karras is a priest with an intense weight on his shoulders. He sees things on Earth that are horrible, and he wonders why there's seemingly no response from heaven. He does what he can. In fact, while on his way to visit his mom, a homeless man on the subway approaches him, slurring out, "I'm Catholic," a few times before Karras guides him to a bench, sits him down, tucks $1 into the man's soiled pants. We get a very human perspective from him on all of it. Karras is not seen to be doing this out of kindness, only obligation to his image as a priest. And yet, he still does it. He even moves the $1 from the man's jacket pocket into his pants pocket, afraid that it would be lost in the jacket pocket. When he exits the subway, we learn that that was Karras's last $1, intended for a cab to take him to his mother's apartment. Instead, he walks. Despite this one chapter being short, so much happens in it. We leave Father Karras participating in a mass and despairing over his doubt. New guilt for his doubt, new doubt for his guilt. Meanwhile, Chris has noticed some odd little things happening as filming wraps. Regan is sleepwalking, hearing knocking in her room, and playing around with a Ouija board. Playing with a Ouija board. I guess that explains why people think they're evil. Regan says she talks to someone named Captain Howdy, and Chris kind of writes it off as odd, but nothing too worrisome. Then there's other things like Regan claiming her bed shakes. She starts getting kind of mean and out of character for herself, refusing to eat. Chris seeks medical care for Regan, and get this. The family doctor prescribes her Ritalin. Fucking Ritalin. This doctor said, she says the bed's shaking and she started talking to something with the Ouija board. Here's some diet meth. The fact that back in the 70s, you could just do that is almost infuriating as someone who had to jump through a million hoops for ADHD testing as an adult. Chris starts Regan on the Ritalin and begins moving along with her life, trusting that Ritalin would be the cure for what was happening. She decides to host a dinner party with a few notable guests: the director Burke Dennings, the Jesuit priest from Georgetown University Joe Dyer, a psychic whose name I've forgotten and is not really important, and an astronaut. There's other people too, I'm sure, but it's a pretty small affair. Before the party even starts, Chris puts Regan to bed. Then all the adults begin mingling, chit-chatting. Dennings gets absolutely hammered, as is his track record. He also begins yelling and screaming at Carl, the housekeeper, calling him a Nazi. This is also all par for the course. Dennings has a reputation for getting absolutely blasted and then getting mad as hell at everyone around him, calling staff for his movies in the middle of the night to scream and yell. He also has a particular word he likes to use: cunting. He's aggressively British and uses that specific word a lot, which is something to really keep in mind. Pretty early in the evening, a senator and his wife go to leave in a rush, claiming the wife has a headache, which perplexes Chris. However, it is then revealed that Dennings had a bit of something to do with it. "Oh, Burke," sighed Sharon. In a guarded tone, she described an encounter between the senator and the director. Dennings had remarked to him, in passing, said Sharon, that there appeared to be an alien pubic hair floating round in my gin. Then he turned to the senator and added in a tone that was vaguely accusatory, "Never seen it before in my life. Have you?" Chris giggled as Sharon went on to describe how the senator's embarrassed reaction had triggered one of Dennings' quixotic rages, in which he'd expressed his boundless gratitude for the existence of politicians, since without them one couldn't distinguish who the statesmen were, you see. When the senator had moved away in a huff, the director turned to Sharon and said proudly, "There, you see? I didn't curse. Now then, don't you think I handled that rather demurely?" Dennings goes off to sleep in one of Chris's rooms. She thinks it's pretty funny, which, I mean, it kind of is. He's out of the picture for the rest of the night, passed out drunk. Things go along, people get to know each other, and Father Dyer talks about how there's been some desecrations at a little church on campus. And he's not really eager to spill the beans on it, but says that it might be a black mass. As they're discussing this, suddenly, things turn on their head. The dean eyed his watch. "Well, I really should be going," he said to Chris. "I've got the 6 o'clock mass in Dahlgren Chapel. I've got the banjo mass, Dyer beamed. Then his eyes shifted to a point in the room behind Chris, and he sobered abruptly. Well, now, I think we have a visitor, Mrs. McNeil, he cautioned, motioning with his head. Chris turned and gasped on seeing Reagan in her nightgown, urinating gushingly onto the rug. Staring fixedly at the astronaut, she intoned in a lifeless voice, "You're going to die up there." Yeah, this was the part that, while it is the first thing that's truly disturbing, it actually was kind of funny to me. And before you say anything, let me walk you through the thought process I had. You are a demon. You're possessing a little girl. Tonight is the night you're going to do something truly horrible to disturb those around you and make everyone turn from the light of God. What should your first act of desecration in this body be? Make her piss on the carpet and tell an astronaut he's going to die in space. That was your first idea? The thought just tickled me so much in the moment. Chris gets Reagan to bed, thinking it's another weird instance of sleepwalking. Everyone is very shaken. Several people leave, probably because a child just peed on the carpet and told a guy he was going to die. The last to leave is the psychic, who, when asked, says Chris should take the Ouija board from Reagan. She checks on Reagan, who is sleeping soundly, then goes to bed herself, exhausted by the socializing and worrying over her daughter. Her head hits the pillow, and she's out, but it feels like no time at all elapses when she wakes up to screaming, "Mother, come here! Come here! I'm afraid!" "Yes, I'm coming. All right, hun, I'm coming." Chris raced down the hall to Reagan's bedroom, whimpering, crying, sounds like bed springs. "Oh, my baby, what's wrong?" Chris exclaimed as she reached out and flicked on the lights. Good Christ almighty. Reagan lay taut on her back, face stained with tears and contorted with terror as she gripped at the sides of her narrow bed. "Mother, why is it shaking?" she cried. "Make it stop. Oh, I'm scared. Make it stop. Mother, please, make it stop." The mattress of the bed was quivering violently back and forth.
I'm in danger.
Part 2 opens with more heartbreak. Damien Karras' mother has died. She has a lonely funeral and is buried in an overcrowded cemetery, and Karras openly weeps next to her grave, making his uncles wait for him. The thought of leaving her alone makes him uncomfortable, but she's been alone for a while, hasn't she? He goes home, and Father Dyer visits him with a bottle of scotch, lets him drink his grief away, and puts him to bed. He wakes up from a nightmare where his mother is searching for him, and despite all of his yelling, she can't find him. We see a recollection of a call from one of his uncles from some time before his mother's death. "Dimmy, the edema's affected her brain. She won't let a doctor come anywhere near her. Just keeps screaming things. Even talks to the goddamn radio. I figure she's got to go to Bellevue, Dimmy. A regular hospital won't put up with that. I just figure a couple of months, and she's good as new. Then we take her out again. Okay? Listen, Dimmy, I tell you, we already done it. They give her a shot, and then take her into ambulance this morning. We didn't want to bother you, except there's a hearing, and you got to sign the papers. Now, what? Private hospital? Who's got the money, Dimmy? You?" He goes through his next day and has other recollections of the time leading up to his mother's death, the hearings he'd had to go to with his mother to determine her fate, and it is just heartbreaking. As he closed his eyes and held the host, he saw his mother in the hearing room, her hands clasped gentle in her lap, her expression docile and confused, as the judge explained to her the Bellevue psychiatrist's report. "Do you understand that, Mary?" She had nodded, wouldn't open her mouth. They'd taken her dentures. "Well, what do you say about that, Mary?" She'd proudly answered him, "My boy, he speak for me." Something about that is just absolutely heart-wrenching. She didn't really entirely know what was happening. Between her mental state and English being her second language, his mom speaks to him in English, so we can only assume Karras doesn't know his mother's first language well enough to speak to her, which I found in research through Greek, and if that was obvious to you, congratulations, you get the special little star sticker for the video. This poor woman has no translator. And just before this, we see something even more heartbreaking. We see her institutionalized and blaming her son. In the tabernacle door, he saw the face of the nurse at Bellevue Receiving. Hearing again the screams from the isolation room. "You her son?" "Yes, I'm Damien Karras." "Well, I wouldn't go in there. She's pitching a fit." He looked through the port at the windowless room with the naked light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Padded walls, stark, no furniture save for the cot on which she raved. As she met his gaze, she'd grown suddenly silent, moved to the port with a baffled look. "Why you do this to me? Why?" The eyes had been meeker than a lamb's. Later, another pastor, one that's higher up the chain of command, comes to report another desecration at the little chapel on campus. Previously, they noted that someone put a dick on the statue of Jesus on the cross, and someone else had shit on the altar. This time, it's more of the same, plus a prayer card with some typing on it in Latin depicting the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene having sex. The pastor tells Karras that there's a theory going around that the perpetrator could be a priest, especially with the fluent Latin on the card. He's coming to Karras because he gives psychiatric counseling to the other priests. Karras agrees that it could be some kind of sleepwalking fits one of the priests has, but when asked, he doesn't know who could be doing it. There's some discussion from the pastor that might be him suggesting that Karras is behind it, trying to get across the idea that maybe if this mystery priest did it and was told he might be doing it in his sleep, that he'd realize it. Karras sees the attempt but doesn't really fall for the bait. Besides, as we'll learn later on, it's not him doing the desecrations. We end his first chapter with him being reassigned from counseling duties to doing psychiatry lectures at the Georgetown University Medical School. Next, we come back to Chris and Reagan in the middle of another doctor's appointment. After the fiasco at the dinner party, Chris decided it would be better to bring her back in. A good idea. Reagan is being evaluated in the examination room with Dr. Klein and a nurse, Chris in the doctor's office next door. After a few minutes of what kind of reads like Dr. Klein testing a reflex, Reagan sits up and spits in his face. Dr. Klein has the nurse stay in the room with Reagan, and he returns to Chris. Chris explains everything that's been happening since they saw him last, lays out everything with the dinner party and seeing Reagan's bed shake that night. And this is only 2 days after that happened, and it's the earliest he could see her, but there's also some new concerning additions. Reagan can hear Captain Howdy, the entity from the Ouija board, and is talking to him when she thinks no one else is watching, and that Reagan smells something burning in her bedroom. Dr. Klein theorizes that she's having clonus seizures, but the reflex he just tested came up negative, so instead, he suggests an EEG. If it's what he thinks it is, Reagan should have a lesion on her brain, which will show up on the brainwave readings. Then they can remove it, and theoretically, she'll be all cured. After a considerable effort to sedate Reagan enough to get her to comply, they set up the EEG, and, well, you can tell where this is going. The book is called The Exorcist, not The Surgeon. It reads completely normal. Dr. Klein is stumped, sends Reagan off for x-rays, and suggests that the window in Reagan's room be locked shut so she can't do anything dangerous while having one of her little episodes. They go home, Reagan goes to sleep off the sedation, and it's mentioned that a book from the psychic was sent to Chris. The title is Study of Devil Worship and Related Occult Phenomena. Chris puts it back on the table with the intention of reading it later, but she's tired. Reagan sleeps through the night, Chris checks on her before going to bed herself, and in the morning, the book on devil worship is gone. Nobody notices. Dr. Klein takes the case and x-rays to a neurologist and is talking it over with him, presumably the next day, when they get a call from Chris asking them to go over to the house right now. She's not able to really explain what's going on, but begs Dr. Klein to come visit. Klein invites the neurologist, who agrees. When they get to the McNeil household, it is an absolute horror show. There's moaning and screaming from upstairs in Reagan's room. They go up, and as Klein is trying to introduce the neurologist, he notices just what the fuck is happening to Reagan, and it is not pretty. She's being flung up and then slammed back into her bed repeatedly. The entire time, she's crying out for her mother to make it stop, that he's trying to kill her. She's being brought a foot into the air before being tossed back down each time. Then she suddenly stops, writhing around on the bed, her eyes rolling into the back of her head as she cries out that he's burning her up from inside out. Her legs begin crossing and uncrossing rapidly and uttering repeatedly, "No on my, no on my," which no one really understands. But the real show begins as Klein approaches her. I know I gave you a content warning before, but this next section especially is just very heinous. It's uncomfortable. Klein reached down to check her pulse. "Now, let's see what the trouble is, dear," he said gently, and abruptly was reeling, stunned and staggering, across the room from the force of a vicious, backward swing of Reagan's arm as the girl sat up, her face contorted with a hideous rage. "The sow is mine," she bellowed in a coarse and powerful voice. "She is mine. Keep away from her. She is mine." A yelping laugh gushed up from her throat, and then she fell on her back as if someone had pushed her. She pulled up her nightgown, exposing her genitals. As Klein approached the bedside, Reagan seemed to hug herself, her hands caressing her arms. "Ah, yes, my pearl," she crooned in that strangely coarsened voice. Her eyes were closed as if in ecstasy. "My child, my flower, my pearl." Then again she was twisting from side to side, moaning meaningless syllables over and over, and abruptly sat up with eyes staring wide with helpless terror. She mewed like a cat, then barked, then neighed, and then, bending at the waist, started whirling her torso around in rapid, strenuous circles. She gasped for breath. "Oh, stop him," she wept. "Stop him. It hurts. Make him stop. Make him stop. I can't breathe." This poor child is being tormented from the inside out by something that she knows wants to kill her, and nothing is off the table for this despicable entity. The doctors do what they can. They sedate her, she finally falls back and passes out, and after some discussions with Chris, they take a spinal tap. After analyzing the fluid, they find nothing out of the ordinary, and they confirm that there's no illicit substances in the house. So they finally decide to consult a psychiatrist. After this devastating conclusion that nothing was physically wrong with Reagan, Chris returns home. Her housekeepers have come back from an evening out. Sharon is not in, but when she does, she tells Chris that she left Reagan in the care of Burke Dennings, who has slipped by and decided to stay and wait for Chris to return while Sharon goes out to pick up some prescriptions for Reagan. Well, none of the rest of us had seen Dennings, so it was assumed he ended up leaving at some point before the rest of the adults returned home. Thankfully, Reagan had been asleep the entire time. Chris had checked on her just before the housekeepers got home, noting that Reagan's bedroom window was open, likely to try and air out the scent of urine in the room. The end of the day doesn't bring any peace with it. Reagan is still sleeping, just as the doctors expected. Sharon and Chris eat a little dinner, watch some TV, and close to midnight, a call comes in to let Chris know that Burke Dennings is dead. Not just dead. He was drunk, fell on the steps next to her house, and someone watched him just continuously fall over himself in the street until finally he came to a stop with a broken neck. It's a long night. Chris stays up drinking. Sharon stays up to comfort her. In the early morning hours, Chris watches as Sharon enters the room with a tray of ice and sees Reagan behind her, gliding along like a spider and sticking her tongue out repeatedly like a snake. She would move with Sharon's movements, Sharon not noticing until the tongue hit her ankle. They scream and call for the doctor yet again. At a psychiatrist's office, Reagan is sedated again, insisting that someone, maybe Captain Howdy, is in her body and doing these terrible things to her. The doctor attempts to hypnotize her, and it seems to work for a while. She has a conversation with the psychiatrist that we'll revisit at a later time with a later revelation. But the hypnosis ends with Reagan grabbing the doctor by the family jewels and squeezing as hard as she can. The conclusion by all of the doctors is that Reagan, whatever she's going through, is not being faked by her. They suggest she goes to a clinic for observation and treatment for about 2 or 3 weeks. The only issue? It's in Dayton, Ohio. They go home, they begin packing. A detective shows up at the door. Detective Kinderman. This first meeting is not super important other than they go over everything that happened the night of the death of Burke Denning. They don't go into specifics on what's going on with Reagan, and Kinderman kind of plays himself off to be a bit of an old klutz who's just kind of tying up loose ends for Denning's death. He leaves, sees Reagan in her window maybe. We find he discreetly picks up physical evidence. In this case, pay from a sculpture Reagan made for her mom at the beginning of the book. The specifics aren't important. We just know he's suspicious of whatever happened that night at the McNeil household in relation to the death of Burke Dennings. He goes back to his office, and we find he's trying to connect the dots between the chapel desecrations and the death of Burke Dennings, then goes to the morgue to take another look at the body. It's then that we discover Dennings didn't just fall and break his neck. His whole head got turned around on his neck. My man got the chiropractor special. Later, Kinderman goes to consult Father Karras. It serves to kind of bring everything all together amongst the main players and try to bring more connection to the desecrations and murder. But we also see Kinderman and Karras have an amazing kind of chemistry together. Kinderman not only insists that Father Karras looks like Marlon Brando, but that they should go out to the movies together since he has passes. Kinderman specifically, speaking on the murder, wonders if maybe Dennings died in a ritualistic black mass style for some reason. I don't know, to be honest. It's a lot of Kinderman just throwing shit and seeing what sticks. He gets more physical evidence from Karras, this time the altar card with the story about the Mariathou. Everyone goes about their day, and Kinderman makes an official forensic connection between Reagan's paint and paint on one of the desecrated statues. Kinderman is also sniffing out a side plot with Carl, the husband, and the housekeeper duo. But honestly, this shit is already getting really long, so I'm just going to explain it outright. Carl goes to visit his and Willie's daughter, a young woman with a physical disability and an addiction to heroin. Willie believes she's dead, believes she's been dead for a long time. Only Carl knows. He goes to give her money, sometimes tries to convince her to get her help, but she doesn't ever seem ready to accept help, still deep in the throes of her addiction. Carl was visiting her the night Burke Dennings died, so his original story is full of shit, and Kinderman knows that, but he doesn't have the answers at this exact moment. A month passes. Chris and Reagan return home from, Dayton. She's just gotten worse. They're putting her on a feeding tube. Restraining straps are put on the bed to keep Reagan from hurting herself. The clinic has been asking to make sure they have no religion because, get this, the clinic has come to the conclusion that an exorcism might be the best course of option here. Not to admit that any of it is actually working, but they air it as a sort of placebo, that it'll make Reagan think she's better, and then she actually will be better. This is the last effort before institutionalizing her, which is really what they suggest before the exorcism, but Chris is not ready to let that happen. Once they get settled, Chris finds that book on possession that was given by the psychic and starts going through it, connecting dots. Kinderman comes by and interrupts, basically just to tell her that Burke Dennings died with his head twisted on backward and that shit's kind of fucked up, huh? So you're super sure everything happened the way you said it did? He discreetly gets more physical evidence, some typing from the typewriter Chris owns and Sharon uses. He confronts Carl out front, away from everyone else, and basically tells him he's full of shit for his timeline on the night Dennings had his little accident, but doesn't arrest him because he has nothing on him, and Carl admits nothing either. Kinderman finally leaves, and the house is a little tense. We finally learn that the demonic possession book was rediscovered by Willie, and put on the bookshelf where Chris found it. The odd part is that it was found under Reagan's bed while cleaning. No one knows how or why. Suddenly, a commotion breaks out from upstairs. They're screaming and yelling. Carl is hollering at Reagan. When they enter her room, Reagan has discovered a crucifix put under her pillow and, well, again, I don't like that I can't really say everything I want to say or cite everything I want to cite. I have to cut around some spots in Mr. Blatty's writing, but here is what I can directly quote. Frenzied, Chris raced for the stairs, toward the bedroom, heard a blow, someone reeling, someone crashing like a boulder to the floor with her daughter crying, "No! Oh, no, don't! Oh, no, please!" And Carl bellowing, "No, not Carl. Someone else." A thundering bass that was threatening, raging. Chris plunged down the hall and burst into the bedroom, gasped, stood rooted in paralyzing shock as the rappings boomed massively, shivering through walls, as Carl lay unconscious on the floor near the bureau, as Reagan, her legs propped up and spread wide on a bed that was violently bouncing and shaking, clutched the bone-white crucifix in raw-knuckled hands, eyes bulging in a face that was bloodied from the nose, the nasogastric tubing ripped out. "Oh, please! Oh, no, please!" she was shrieking as her hands brought the crucifix closer, and she seemed to be straining to push it away. "You'll do as I tell you, filth! You'll do it!" The threatening bellow, the words, came from Reagan, her voice coarse and guttural, bristling with venom, while in an instantaneous flash her expression and features were hideously transmuted into those of the feral, demonic personality that had appeared in the course of hypnosis. And now faces and voices, as Chris watched stunned, interchanged with rapidity. "No! You'll do it! Please! You will, you bitch, or I'll kill you! Please! Yes, you're going to let Jesus fuck you! Fuck you!" Reagan now, eyes wide and staring, flinching from the rush of some hideous finality, mouth agape, shrieking at the dread of some ending. Then abruptly, the demonic face once more possessed her, now filled her, the room choking suddenly with a stench in the nostrils, with an icy cold that seeped from the walls as the rappings ended, and Reagan's piercing cry of terror turned to a guttural, yelping laugh of malevolent spite and rage triumphant, roaring in that deep, coarse, deafening voice. "Now you're mine! Now you're mine, you stinking cow! You bitch! Let Jesus fuck you! Fuck you!" Chris crumpled to the floor in a daze of horror, in a swirling of images, sounds in the room, as her vision spun madly, blurring, unfocused, her ears ringing loudly with chaotic distortions as she tried to raise herself, was too weak, faltered, then looked toward the still, blurred bed, toward Reagan with her back to her. She thought she saw hazily, in a swimming fog, her daughter's head turning slowly around on a motionless torso, rotating monstrously, inexorably, until at last it seemed facing backward. "Do you know what she did, your cunting daughter?" giggled an elfin face.
"Welcome to hell, motherfucker!"
Chris calls the psychic and essentially goes, "Hey, yeah, Reagan's doing great and definitely not possessed by an otherworldly entity that makes her do horrific shit like piss on the carpet or perform sexual acts in front of other people. By the way, what was the name of that priest who was a psychiatrist? Why? Oh, because, I was thinking of having another dinner party." Yeah, girl, you are not subtle, but that's okay, because you need the help anyway. She meets up with Father Karras in public and tries to keep things on the DL. Also, very much insists Father Karras keep things on the DL. Her being a movie star has complicated all of this. She doesn't want it sensationalized. And to be fair, who would? It's not like we can all be Kris Jenner.
Go, Kylie, go. Good job, Kylie. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Wow, look at her go.
Father Karras makes a visit to Reagan, notably not in uniform. He's skeptical that she needs an exorcism, but he agrees to see her because Chris is clearly worried out of her fucking brain. He goes to see her, and it goes just about as well as you'd expect. Reagan is not a fan, immediately knows he's a priest, asks him to loosen the restraining straps on her, and claims she's the devil himself. Karras goads him, this entity, which, yes, the entity inside of Reagan is male, I guess. I don't know, it's complicated. This entity is pissed off, trying to convince Karras that he is the devil, that he's an evil thing, and he's not Reagan. Tries to get him to play along by offering to read his mind or give answers to obscure trivia, but Karras says all he wants is to see Reagan. That's the only thing that will prove to Karras that he's not Reagan. So we do. We see Reagan. In just the blink of an eye, we switch from this disgusting thing to a terrified little girl shrieking soundlessly. We only see her for a few seconds, and then it switches back to the thing that really runs the show. He taunts Karras back, insisting that his mother is there in the room with them, then projectile vomits on him from across the room. After that, Karras leaves the room, speaks to Chris, tells her Reagan needs to be in a hospital, but Chris vehemently refuses. This refusal is different than at the clinic. This time, she says that she can't have anyone involved because she believes Reagan has done something. She won't admit what it is, but she can't let anyone else in on this. They have a prolonged discussion that ends up with Chris, an atheist, trying to convince Father Karras, the priest, that Reagan is possessed and needs an exorcism. He takes some recordings of Reagan's and goes back to his living quarters to analyze them and think about it all. This part really kind of reads like Karras trying to convince himself that Reagan is just sick and not possessed. It's both out of a duty to Reagan, but it's also a fight for his own faith. He's still deep in a pit of doubt, and the fight for Reagan isn't just for her, it's for Father Karras' belief. Finally, he finds a player in the language lab on campus and listens to the tape of Reagan from before her possession and realizes that that thing he met today wasn't Reagan. There was no way. But he dares not to accept it, so he devises a test. The next day, he arrives back at the McNeil household, asks for some blank tapes and a recorder to be brought up to Reagan's room, then enters. As soon as he enters, it reeks, and it reeks more because the thing makes Reagan shit her pants. I was not kidding when I said it wasn't just our pants that would be shit. They have plastic pants on her because of how much the demonic entity makes her soil herself. In fact, the entity admits it's not actually the devil, just a devil. But it becomes another game of cat and mouse between the two. The demon insists Karras should begin the exorcism soon because it would bring the two of them together, then begins making other phenomena appear in the room. I see hands threatening to strangle Father Karras, a dresser drawer being pulled open. But when Karras asks for specifics to prove this devil is real, he refuses. When Carl stops in to deliver the blank tapes and recorder, the thing in Reagan flings insults at him with the British personality she's exhibited. Carl gets called Himmler. There's mentions of sauerkraut. The thing tells Carl to go and visit your club-footed daughter. Bring her sauerkraut. Sauerkraut and heroin, Thorndike. She will love it. The personality, if you haven't caught on yet, is Burke. It's Burke Dennings. Even goes as far as to ask Father Karras for a drink. But the games still continue. The demons straight admitting that they can't just absolve Karras of all of his doubts, or else it's not fun anymore. Verbally lashing each other pretty equally so that Karras can pick up audio samples for examination later. Finally, he pulls out the holy water, spritzing Reagan with it. The thing recoils and screams at him to stop, which seems like a good thing, right?
False.
It's a bad thing, because that ain't holy water. That there was regular old tap water. More of the weird gibberish from No On My. He finally leaves and talks to Chris, who does confirm that the British personality is Burke Dennings. Later, he talks to Carl, who also says that when Reagan is acting like Burke Dennings, it really seems like it's actually him. Carl goes to visit his daughter again. Kinderman has been following and confronts him, and he says nothing. Karras takes the tapes to a language specialist on campus and asks him to analyze them quickly. Make sure that it's the same person speaking, and if it's possible, that the weird gibberish from No On My is a language. Then he goes back to Chris to tell her that he thinks Reagan just needs more psychiatric help. And Chris ends up exploding on him, telling him that the doctors at the clinic are the ones that sent her to try an exorcism, and that Reagan herself admitted to killing Burke Dennings, and she can't let that get out. Karras goes back to brood in his room, goes over all of the papers and medical records, tries to find an inn that will definitely get the bishop to agree to an exorcism, because at this point, he's so close to believing. Finally, he sees a note about the EEG Dr. Klein took and tells Chris to let Klein know he's on the way and to refer to him as Doctor, not Father. Karras arrives, takes the EEG readout from Klein, basically says, hey, even though it's exceedingly normal, isn't it weird that there's literally zero change? Like, none at all. As if you copied and pasted each pattern and repeated it. Klein hadn't thought anything of it, then has to go deal with another patient, so Karras leaves to go back to the McNeil household. On the way, he sees Kinderman parked on the street and has a little bit of a nervous moment, afraid now that Kinderman is going to figure out that Reagan might have been the one to adjust Burke's cervical spine. He decides to initiate the conversation to be on the upper hand, and eventually Kinderman gets kind of scooted off by Karras. Karras returns to confront Reagan again, who, in perfect German, asks Carl if his daughter likes to dance. Carl gets mad, but Karras corrals him out of the room, and then they continue. The laughter had stopped. Karras turned back. The demon was watching him. It looked pleased. So you're back, it croaked. I'm surprised. I would think that embarrassment over the holy water might have discouraged you from ever returning, but then I forget that a priest has no shame. Karras begins to test the demon again, speaks to him in German, then in Latin. Perfect Latin. Confesses to killing Dennings. Then claims he's just been plucking the answers from Karras' head and doesn't actually know Latin, laughing all the while. They quarrel a bit more, and the demon refuses to give any real answers to absolve Father Karras' doubt. And eventually, they both drowse off to sleep. Karras wakes up first and wanders downstairs, telling Sharon to start a feeding tube on Reagan since she's unconscious. Then questions any language learning Reagan's had. It's not much. Sharon also mentions that she thought Reagan was speaking Russian at one point. Everyone is at their breaking point. Karras has no definite proof to let an exorcism happen, so he wearily returns back to his little living space on campus. He gets back, and he has a message left for him to call the language specialist he'd left the tapes with earlier. This is exactly the break he needs, so he goes right away to call him, and the specialist is kind of chuckling, thinking Karras was playing a joke on him. The different voices are probably different personalities in the psychiatric sense. I don't know, that part is based on 70s psychiatry and isn't super relevant today. It's just them trying to find a scientific and medical explanation for what's happening to Reagan. However, the gibberish, it's English, just reversed. Every time we spoke with the No One My entity, we were just hearing English reversed. On the tape, we get the following. Danger. Not yet. Indecipherable. Will die. Little time. Now the indecipherable. Let her die. No, no, sweet. It is sweet in the body. I feel there is indecipherable. Better indecipherable than the void. I fear the priest. Give us time. Fear the priest. He is indecipherable. No, not this one. The indecipherable. The one who, indecipherable. He is ill. Ah, the blood. Feel the blood. How it sings. Here, Karras asked, "Who are you?" with the answer, "I am no one. I am no one." Then Karras, "Is that your name?" And then, "I have no name. I am no one. Many. Let us be. Let us warm in the body. Do not indecipherable. From the body into the void. Into indecipherable. Leave us. Leave us. Let us be. Karras. Marin? Marin?" At this point, I'm going to go back to that spot we earmarked earlier when we were first getting Reagan intensive help and we had her hypnotized. The psychiatrist had a conversation with the No One My entity. Here it is as we read it. "Are you the person in Reagan?" the psychiatrist asked. She nodded. "Who are you?" "No One My. she answered gutturally. That's your name? She nodded. You're a man? She said. Say. Did you answer? Say. If that's yes, nod your head. She nodded. Are you speaking in a foreign language? Say. Where do you come from? Dog. You say that you come from a dog? Dog morph motion, Reagan replied. And now, the right way around. Are you the person in Reagan? The psychiatrist asked. She nodded. Who are you? I am no one, she answered gutturally. That's your name? She nodded. You're a man? She said yes. Did you answer? Yes. If that's yes, nod your head. She nodded. Are you speaking in a foreign language? Yes. Where do you come from? God. You say that you come from a dog? No, I come from God, Reagan replied. Much more for us to chew on. And a lot more for Karras to chew on. He does more research, trying to build an argument to allow the exorcism. Eventually, Sharon calls him in the middle of the night and asks him to come to the house. So he does. She takes Karras into Reagan's room in the middle of the night, shines a light on Reagan's body to reveal something from inside of Reagan is scratching out some words. Not even scratching, it just kind of appears. But it's terrifying because it comes up as, help me. Then Sharon whispers that that's Reagan's handwriting. At 9 o'clock that morning, Damien Karras came to the president of Georgetown University and asks for permission to seek an exorcism. He received it, and immediately afterward went to the bishop of the diocese, who listened with grave attention to all that Karras had to say. You're convinced that it's genuine? The bishop asked finally. I've made a prudent judgment that it meets the conditions set forth in the ritual, answered Karras evasively. He still did not dare believe. Not his mind, but his heart had tugged him to this moment. Pity and the hope for a cure through suggestion. It's approved, and they move to put Father Marin in the driver's seat of the ritual. That guy from the prologue, from nearly 40 pages ago in my script, the old guy in northern Iraq on the dig? Yeah, that's Father Lancaster Marin, who has recently just gotten back to the States. It's revealed he did a months-long exorcism in Africa that nearly killed him, and now the church is putting him at the head of this exorcism. Kinderman is sniffing through everything. All of his clues, like a bloodhound on a trail. He knows that Carl is innocent of Dennings' death because he confronted his daughter. Carl still refused to speak to him, refusing to risk his daughter being taken in for being an addict. Since he couldn't get it out of Carl, Kinderman went to Carl's daughter, who was, understandably, hesitant to talk to the fuzz. When Kinderman explained that Carl might be guilty of murder, she gave the real alibi, that he'd been visiting her. He then officially gives her the ultimatum that she must check herself into a rehab clinic in the next 2 weeks, or else be dogged by Kinderman until he has enough evidence to arrest her. This is when we realize that this story is completely fictional, because Kinderman is showing the smallest amount of human decency despite being a cop. He firmly believes that whoever is desecrating the chapel is also the one who killed Burke Dennings. He also knows for a fact that the Latin on the altar card, again, the one with the Maria Lu, was written with the same typewriter Chris McNeil owns and Sharon uses, but the typing was done in a different cadence than how Sharon types. In fact, whoever did it was way stronger than Sharon. He's starting to think it's possible that, since Carl wasn't the one who killed Burke, that it might have been Reagan in the throes of a mental episode. He doesn't like the idea, calls himself sick for the thought, but it's the only thing left. Meanwhile, Karras is keeping Reagan heavily sedated because the thing in her body is pitching a fit so intense that it will literally overexert her to death. There's a small quiet moment between Father Karras and Chris. She used to put a rose on my plate in the morning before I'd go to work. Karras looked up with a question in his eyes. Reagan, Chris told him. She looked down. Yeah, that's right. I forget. You've never met her. She blew her nose and dabbed at her eyes. Want some brandy in that coffee, Father Karras? She asked. As Chris leaves to get brandy to self-medicate against the screaming coming from her daughter's room, Karras has another moment of self-reflection. Karras sat alone and sipped bleakly at his coffee. He felt warm in the sweater that he wore beneath his cassock. He felt weak in his failure to have given Chris comfort. Then a memory of childhood shimmered up sadly. A memory of Ginger, his mongrel dog, growing skeletal and dazed in a box in the apartment. Ginger shivering with fever and vomiting, while Karras covered her with towels, tried to make her drink warm milk, until the neighbor came by and saw it was distemper, shook his head and said, "Your dog needed shots right away." Then, dismissed from school one afternoon, to the street, in columns of twos to the corner. His mother there to meet him, unexpected, looking sad, and then taking his hand to press a shiny $50 piece into it. Elation, so much money. Then her voice, soft and tender. "Gingy die." He looked down at the steaming, bitter blackness in his cup and felt his hands empty of comfort or of cure. "Pious bastard!" The demon, still raging. "Your dog needed shots right away." Finally, Father Merrin arrives. He's kind, polite, gentle, but ready to see Regan right away. Doesn't need any dinner, waves off Chris's insistence that she should have met him at the station. He goes to meet with Regan, who already seems to know Merrin, and in fact is screaming out for him like an old enemy, beating at the bedroom walls. The only one not surprised is Merrin. He goes and takes a brief visit without Chris or Father Karras, so we have no idea what exactly happens in those few minutes, but it ends with Father Merrin walking out calmly, while Regan cackles like a hyena, and Sharon stares back quizzically out of the room. She was in there for the confrontation, and yet even she seems confused on what's just happened. Merrin sends Karras out to get some supplies and sits down for a cup of coffee with Chris. He even accepts her offer for brandy in it. Merrin's presence brings comfort, but we do see a small concern. As Chris walks away from him to let him rest, he feels a bit of a pinch in his face, and he steps away to take nitroglycerin in private. Chris manages to get a word in with Sharon about what happened up in the bedroom, and, well, isn't it just the damnedest thing? Merrin and Regan stared at each other until Regan says, "This time, you're going to lose." After that, Father Merrin just turned around and left. When Father Karras returns, they are preparing themselves for the exorcism, getting their items and readings in order. They have to bundle themselves up because of how cold it is in the room. Chris tries to come in with them, and Father Karras implores her not to. Father Merrin defers to Father Karras, and so Chris does not enter at first. There is a completely different emotion to Father Merrin's interactions with Regan. He hasn't been wilted under doubt like Karras has. So we get this amazing beginning to the exorcism, the beginning of the end. A smothering stillness hung over the room. Then Regan licked a wolfish, blackened tongue across her cracked and swollen lips. It sounded like a hand smoothing crumpled parchment. "Well, proud scum," croaked the demon. At last you've come." The old priest lifted his hand and traced the sign of the cross above the bed, and then repeated the gesture toward all in the room. Turning back, he plucked the cap from the vial of holy water. "Ah, yes, the holy urine now," rasped the demon. "The semen of the saints." Merrin lifted up the vial, and the face of the demon grew livid, contorted. "Ah, will you, bastard?" it seethed at him. "Will you?" Merrin started sprinkling. The demon jerked its head up, the mouth and the neck muscles trembling with rage. "Yes, sprinkle, sprinkle, Merrin. Drench us, drown us in your sweat. Your sweat is sanctified, Saint Merrin. Bend and fart out clouds of incense. Bend and show the holy rump that we may worship and adore it. Kiss it, lick it, blessed. Be silent." The words flung forth like bolts. Karras flinched and jerked his head around in wonder at Merrin, who stared commandingly at Regan. And the demon was silent, was returning his stare, but the eyes were now hesitant, blinking, wary. For the first time, we see something from this thing possessing Regan that is not just outright delight. giddiness or games being played. Not quite fear, but far from the confidence it held with Karis. In an attempt to regain ground, the thing spits in Marin's face, but he calmly wipes it away and continues reading the prayer. Reagan's body reacts to Marin's recitation, eyes rolling back, tongue flicking out. Then the front of the bed begins to hover off of the floor. Karis is astonished. Marin calmly reminds him to give him the responses to the prayers. They soldier on. Chris sneaks a peek at one point and runs away horrified. Reagan is just convulsing, vomiting, continuously lowing like a steer. The bed begins to rock back and forth. Karis is so encapsulated by it that he has to be reminded again to give his responses. Marin's not angry with him. He doesn't fear that his delay will ruin the exorcism. He continues to be a beacon of guiding, comforting light. Karis is keeping a direct touch to Reagan, monitoring her physical health. Her pulse is going absolutely apeshit. There are deafening poundings on the wall. Then the thing inside of Reagan insists that they're going to lose because Reagan is going to die and they can't stop it. Then tries to incite Marin by hurling sexual innuendos, spits in his face again, and continues on with the abuse. Hypocrite, you care nothing at all for the pig. You care nothing. You have made her a contest between us. Liar, lying bastard. Tell us, where's your humility, Marin? In the desert? In the ruins? In the tombs where you fled to escape your fellowmen? To escape from your inferiors, from the halts and the lame of mind? Do you speak to men, you pious vomit? Your abode is in a nest of peacocks, Marin. Your place is within yourself. Go back to the mountaintop and speak to your only equal. Marin continued with the prayers, unheeding, as the torrent of abuse raged on. Do you hunger, Saint Marin? Here, I give you nectar and ambrosia. I give to you the food of your god, croaked the demon. It excreted diuretically, mocking, for this is my body. Now consecrate that, Saint Marin. I am not going to lie. The fact that the demon, diarrhea's in its pants, compares it to a godly meal, then says, consecrate that, Saint Marin, is first and foremost disgusting, but also kind of hilarious. It's absolutely vile, but also it is so utterly childish, so pedantic, and honestly, it's hilarious that this is one of the last plays it seems to have. And the interesting part is that it works on Karis, repelling him, but Marin pays absolutely no mind. Members of the house have been filtering in and out, and the demon is taking full advantage of this. It tells Willie, who has stepped in, that their daughter is alive, a hopeless drug addict who Carl has been visiting and hiding from her. Carl begs Willie not to listen, and the two flee from the room. It turns its sights on Karis, who has determined Reagan's pulse is strong enough for another dose of sedation, trying to offer Reagan's body to him, calling her a stable whore. It flips through to Burke Dennings, calling anything and everything a cunt. Chris is forced to assist with the sedation since everyone else is otherwise occupied due to the interference of the demon. The demon loves to see Chris. He calls her a sow, the piglet's mother, tells her to come see her handiwork since she's the one who put all of this guilt on Reagan to begin with, that the guilt over her divorce is what let Reagan become malleable enough to get sick. Chris is disturbed, understandably. Father Karis quickly guides her through the injection, then gets her out of the room. It turns back to Karis, noting his continued kindness, then begins singing a hymn from a benediction, which I didn't really know what that was because I was raised in Baptist and Methodist churches, both entirely on the other side of the spectrum away from Catholicism, where we didn't use none of them fancy words. So for those of you who don't know, because I sure didn't, according to Wikipedia, a benediction, Latin, bene, well, dicere, to speak, is a short invocation for divine help, blessing, and guidance, usually at the end of a worship service. It can also refer to a specific Christian religious service, including the exposition of the Eucharistic host and the monstrance and the blessing of the people with it. Basically, it's a little ritual meant to give you a blessing at the end of a service and as a final wrap up, and sometimes also a part of those days where you have communion, I think. The article also said it can be used as a last blessing for the dying. Karis swears he recognizes the voice, but he can't place it. Sharon comes in to clean up Reagan and give the two priests a small moment of reprieve. In the hallway, Father Karras and Father Merrin warm up a bit and talk some. Karras asks about possession in general, how Merrin knows that it's only one entity in Reagan, and Merrin confesses that he has done battle with this demon before. He doesn't say it outright, but from earlier discussions and the prologue, we can finally come to the conclusion that Reagan is possessed by Pazuzu, who Merrin almost died exorcising in Africa. They continue together to talk about the point of possession. Merrin has theorized that the point is not to create a sin in the one who's possessed. In fact, they say that the sin of the demon doesn't touch the one who's possessed, that it all lies in the demon itself, separate from the body they take hostage. Instead, the point is to create despair in everyone around the host. He also says that even from this possession, there will be good. He can't see how. Hell, I don't think many of us would be able to see how. But he's quietly, calmly, warmly confident that a good will come of this. Then there's this very important exchange. Karras said no more, and for a time they stood in silence while Karras reflected. Another objection came to mind. Once the demon's driven out, he probed, what's to keep it from coming back in? I don't know, Merrin answered. I don't know. And yet it never seems to happen. Never. Never. Merrin excuses himself, and Sharon reemerges after cleaning Reagan. She's passed out, sleeping peacefully, it seems. Karras takes it as a sign to finally relax, to be able to rest at last. But that is shattered in one heartbreaking instance. Why you do this to me, Dimmy? His heart froze. Why you do this? The priest could not move, could not breathe, did not dare to glance over to that sorrowful voice, did not dare see those eyes really there, eyes accusing, eyes lonely. His mother. His mother! You leave me to be priest in me and send me institution. Don't look. Now you chase me away. It's not her. Why you do this? His head throbbing, heart in his throat, Karras shuts his eyes tightly as the voice grew imploring, grew frightened, grew tearful. You always good boy, Dimmy. Please, I am afraid. Please no chase me outside, Dimmy. Please. Not my mother. Outside nothing, only dark, Dimmy. Lonely. Now tearful. You're not my mother, Karras vehemently whispered. Dimmy, please. When utilizing his agony over his mother's final months doesn't get what he wants, Pazuzu switches back to the Dennings personality, proclaiming it truly awful that they're making them, the idea of this group of poor lost souls, leave a nice host. And honestly, after what Reagan did to him, isn't it only fair he gets to stay for a little bit longer? We get to see one possible way his death went down. Look, she killed me. Not our innkeeper, Karras. She. Oh, yes, indeed. It was nodding affirmation. She. I was minding my business at the bar, you see, when I thought I heard her moaning. Upstairs. Well, now, I had to see what ailed her after all, so I went up, and don't you know, she bloody took me by the throat, the little cunt. The voice was whiny now, pathetic. Christ, I've never in my life seen such strength. Began to scream that I was diddling her mother or something, or that I caused the divorce, some such thing. It wasn't dear. But I tell you, love, she pushed me out the bloody fucking window. Voice cracked. High-pitched now. She killed me. Fucking killed me. Now you think it's bloody fair to throw me out? Come along now, Karras, answer me. You think it really fair? I mean, do you? It can't answer how his head got turned around, so Karras holds steadfast. It tries switching to his mother again, pleading not to let her be alone. That doesn't work either. Karras has steeled himself against these two. But when that doesn't work, Pazuzu proclaims again that he's going to take Reagan down. Won't you face the truth, stinking scum? It was the demon. You believe what Merrin tells you? It seethed. You believe him to be holy and good? Well, he is not. He is proud and unworthy. I will prove it to you, Karras. I will prove it by killing the piglet. Karras opened up his eyes, but still dared not look. Yes, she will die, and Merrin's God will not save her, Karras. You will not save her. She will die from Merrin's pride and your incompetence. Bungler, you should not have given her the Librium. I will not let her sleep. Marin finally makes his reappearance and asks Karis what's happened. So Marin gets filled in. Marin asks if there's anything that can be done. Karis at first is full of despair, says that she may slip into a coma if he gives more drugs, but then thinks to contact a cardiac specialist. He knows a friend at the medical school who hustles over there, but there's nothing to be done, not really. When he's asked what can be done, the specialist only replies, pray. With that, the cardiac specialist leaves, and the phrase echoes again, you should not have given her the Librium. They continue the exorcism. It goes through the day, into the next night, and into the next day, Sunday, Mother's Day, of all days. They try all kinds of ways to get Reagan to settle, to go to sleep, to rest, her blood pressure still holding, but her pulse skyrocketing up to 140 BPM. At 7 p.m. on Sunday, the two are exhausted. Pazuzu again tries to incite Karis using the voice of his mother, saying, Today Mother Day, Dimmy. I not good to you? Why you leave me to die all alone, Dimmy? Why? I have a cat climbing on... Hi. Hello. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. You can't see him. But I can. He's a stinky boy. You got anything you want to say to the microphone? You got anything you want to say? I have no idea if y'all can hear his purring. It might be picking up really faint.
This my boy Woodrow. This my boy.
This is my boy. All right, Fuzzy. All right, Booger. At this, Marin insists that Father Karras leave to go rest. So he does. He goes back to the Jesuit residence hall where he lives, goes to crash into his bed for just 30 minutes of sleep, but before he can do that, he gets a call that a Mr. Kinderman is there to see him. He goes to see the detective. The detective says he needs advice. Notices that Father Karras looks like absolute shit. And who wouldn't after the ordeal he's been through? But they go on a walk by the Potomac, coincidentally right back towards the McNeil house, and finally, Kinderman gets to the point. Well, Father, sighed Kinderman, I'm afraid I've got a problem. Karras flicked a brief glance up at Reagan's shuttered window. Professional? Well, partly. Only partly. What is it? Well, mostly it's... Hesitant, Kinderman squinted. Well, mostly it's ethical, you could say, Father Karras. A question. The detective turned around and leaned his back against the wall. He frowned at the sidewalk. Then he shrugged. There's just no one I could talk to about it. Not my captain in particular, you see. I just couldn't. I couldn't tell him, so I thought... The detective sighed and faced out to the river. I was saying, he wheezed. He scratched his brow with his thumbnail. I was saying, well, let's say I'm working on a case, Father Karras. A homicide. Dennings? No, purely hypothetical. You wouldn't be familiar with it. Nothing, not at all. Karras nodded. Like a ritual witchcraft murderer, this looks. The detective continued broodingly. He was frowning, picking words slowly. And let us say in this house, this hypothetical house, there are living 5, and that one must be the killer. With his hand, he made flat, chopping motions of emphasis. Now I know this for a fact. Then he paused, slowly exhaling breath. But then, the problem, all the evidence, well, it points to a child, Father Karras. A little girl, maybe 10, 12 years old. Just a baby. She could maybe be my daughter. He kept his eyes fixed on the embankment beyond them. Yes, I know. Sounds fantastic. Ridiculous, but true. Now there comes to this house, Father, a priest, very famous. In this case, being purely hypothetical, Father, I learned through my also hypothetical genius that this priest has once cured a very special type of illness. An illness which is mental, by the way, a fact I mentioned just in passing for your interest. Karras felt himself turning grayer by the moment. Now also there is Satanism involved in this illness. It happens. Plus, Strength. Yes, incredible strength. And this hypothetical girl, let us say, then could twist a man's head around, you see. Yes, she could. He was nodding now. Yes, she could. Now the question. He grimaced thoughtfully. You see, the girl is not responsible, Father. She's demented. He shrugged. And just a child. A child. He shook his head. And yet the illness that she has, it could be dangerous. She could kill someone else. Who's to know? He again squinted out across the river. It's a problem. What to do? Hypothetically, I mean. Forget it? Forget it and hope she gets... Kinderman paused. Gets well? He reached for a handkerchief. Father, I don't know. He blew his nose. It's a terrible decision. Just awful. He was searching for a clean, unused section of handkerchief. Awful. And I hate to be the one who has to make it. He again blew his nose and lightly dabbed at a nostril. Father, what would be right in such a case, hypothetically? What do you believe would be the right thing to do? For an instant, the Jesuit throbbed with rebellion, with a dull, weary anger at the piling on of weight. He let it ebb. He met Kinderman's eyes and answered softly, I would put it in the hands of a higher authority. I believe it is there at this moment, breathed Kinderman. Yes. And I would leave it there. Their gazes locked. Then Kinderman pocketed the handkerchief. Yes, I thought you would say that. He nodded, then glanced at the sunset. So beautiful, the sight. He tugged back his sleeve for a look at his wristwatch. Well, I have to go. Mrs. K will be shrieking now. The dinner, it's cold. He turned back to Karis. Thank you, Father. I feel better. Much better. Oh, incidentally, you could maybe do me a favor? Give a message? If you meet a man named Engstrom, tell him, well, say, Elvira is in a clinic, she's all right. He'll understand. Would you do that? I mean, if you should meet him. A note for you lovely viewers, Elvira is the name of Carl's daughter. Carl and Willie are the Engstroms. Kinderman has come to his conclusions about Reagan and the death of Burke Dennings and has decided to let it go while still giving this final bit of peace to the Engstroms. Carl especially. The two plan to see a movie. Kinderman's been trying to get Karis to go with him this whole time. Kinderman offers it as a quiet hope to see Karis again, but Karis seems to agree to it only as a matter of comfort for Kinderman. Karis doesn't return to his bed. He watches Kinderman leave, takes one last view of the sunset, holding back tears at its beauty and the stress of the situation he finds himself in. And then he re-enters the McNeil household. Sharon is busy washing foul-smelling laundry. He asks after Carl, who is away on business. Chris is alone in the kitchen, looking at a scrapbook. She offers coffee to Father Karras, then excuses herself, barely holding herself together, and Karras takes a closer look at what Chris has been reading. His gaze shifted to the album. He walked over and looked down. Candid photos, a young girl. With a pang, Karras realized he was looking at Reagan, here blowing out candles on a whipped creamy birthday cake. Here, sitting on a lakefront dock in shorts and a t-shirt, waving gaily at the camera. Something was stenciled on the front of the t-shirt. Camp. He could not make it out. On the opposite page, a ruled sheet of paper bore the script of a child. If instead of just clay, I could take all the prettiest things, like a rainbow, or clouds, or the way a bird sings. Maybe then, mother dearest, if I put them all together, I could really make a sculpture of you. Below the poem. I love you. Happy Mother's Day. The signature, in pencil, was Rags. Karras is angry. Then it drains to sorrow. And he decides he can't wait for coffee or anything else. He goes back to Reagan's room, foregoing the sweater that had kept him warm before, hearing the demon yelling at Marin, "You would have lost and you knew it. You scum, Marin. bastard, come back. It's only when Karis goes to grab a blanket to warm himself again that he realizes Marin is not in the room. But that's not entirely true, is it? He moves to take a blood pressure reading from Reagan and nearly trips over his body. The old priest is dead, face down on the floor of heart failure. This seems to be the final straw for Karis. The entire time he's examining Father Marin, the demon is spitting out vile things, telling him to bring him back so that they can continue to fight, that worms wouldn't even eat his body for the corruption he held. But Karis has had enough. He's weary, he's exhausted, and he's filled with immeasurable rage. Karis stared numbly at the spittle, eyes bulging, did not move, could not hear above the roaring of his blood. And then slowly, in quivering, side-angling jerks, he looked up with a face that was a purpling snarl, an electrifying spasm of hatred and rage. "You son of a bitch," Karis seethed in a whisper that hissed into air like molten steel. "You bastard!" Though he did not move, he seemed to be uncoiling, the sinews of his neck pulling taut like cables. The demon stopped laughing and eyed him with malevolence. "You were losing. You're a loser. You've always been a loser." Reagan splattered him with vomit. He ignored it. "Yes, you're very good with children," he said, trembling. "Little girls. Well, come on. Let's see you try something bigger. Come on." He had his hands out like great fleshy hooks, beckoning slowly. "Come on. Come on, loser. Try me. Leave the girl and take me. Take me." Only a minute later, Chris and Sharon hear shouting between Karis and the demonic entity, then violent bangings from the room. The final words they hear are, "No, I won't let you hurt them. You're not going to hurt them. You're coming with..." Finally, with the splintering of wood and a crash of glass, it comes to an end. Racing to the bedroom, the shutters have been ripped off the window, the glass smashed out. Father Marin is still on the floor. Sharon screams as she notices Father Karis has crashed out of the window onto the same steps that Burke Dennings tumbled down, and is laying in a bloody heap at the bottom of them as onlookers begin to gather. In a pause, we hear the tiny voice of Reagan McNeil, the true voice of Reagan McNeil, calling for her mother, and the two are finally reunited. Sharon races outside, then across the street to the Jesuit residence hall where she finds Father Joe Dyer, Karis's old friend and one-time dinner party guest. She begs him to come help. He gets reception to phone an ambulance and then rushes over to the scene that's continuously building. Dyer kneels by his friend, bloodied and bruised. Karis can't talk, but he's able to squeeze Dyer's wrist. Through that, Dyer gives Karis his final confession and absolution. As it ends, Karis squeezes his wrist as hard as he can, and then the final end comes for him. Dyer leaned over again with his mouth next to Karis's ear, waited, forced the swelling from his throat, and then murmured, "Are you..." He stopped short as the pressure on his wrist abruptly slackened. He pulled back his head and saw the eyes filled with peace and with something else, something mysteriously like joy at the end of heart's longing. The eyes were still staring, but at nothing in this world. Nothing here. Slowly and tenderly, Dyer slid the eyelids down. He heard the ambulance wail from afar. He began to say goodbye, but could not finish. He lowered his head and wept. Despite being decidedly agnostic for 20 plus years now, I will admit to you fully that this scene, this end for Father Karis, makes me so insanely emotional. Rereading it again for this script is making me tear up again. And reading it now, like here in the video also it's a lot. When I first read it, it was like 1 a.m. in bed with my husband sawing logs next to me, and I cried like a little baby at this. The comfort that Karis was finally able to bring out, not only to himself, but to Chris and Reagan McNeil through his final act, the final confirmation of his faith, and the peace it brought him will never not make me emotional. Like I said earlier in the video, I was raised religiously, At one point in my life, I was devoutly Christian, but I lost that faith because it no longer brought me comfort, only anxiety and despair. So, in a way, seeing others receive that comfort, not just in Christianity, obviously, but any kind of religious or spiritual practice, heals a small part of myself. It's seeing others reach a finish line that I chased for so long. In Father Karras' death, his journey through guilt and doubt is probably one of the most beautiful stories I've ever seen. In the epilogue, 6 weeks after the final fatal event there at the McNeil household, the family is packing up to move back to LA. After all, they were only here for Chris to star in Burke Dennings' movie, renting out the house for a short amount of time. Father Dyer comes by to visit. Reagan can't remember anything of what happened that day or the possession as a whole, but seems to have returned back to herself. There's a rose on Chris's plate that morning at breakfast. She laments that Father Karras never even got to meet Reagan. Chris had also been told of Karras' doubt in the last few weeks of his life and says, "I can't believe that. I've never seen such faith in my life. Such a stark contrast to the man we've been reading about." Chris gives Father Dyer a kiss on the cheek as they move to leave. Reagan also reaches for him. When he leans over, she gives him a kiss, not seeming to really understand why. She stares at the Roman collar he's wearing, some part of her maybe unconsciously recognizing it. They leave for the airport, and Detective Kinderman pulls up, having just missed their departure to his great regret. However, he strikes up a conversation with Father Dyer, saying that they should see a movie sometime, saying that Dyer looks a bit like Humphrey Bogart. So, we've reached the end. I picked up a silly little book about possession, published in the 70s, with the intention of understanding a piece of horror history, and came away with a story that leaves me feeling so many things. It's one of the most compelling stories of faith I've seen, while also delivering some of the most vile horrors I've read so far. I think back on that person my dad knew who stopped reading it halfway through, and a part of me laments that they didn't finish it. The people filled with fear for this book and movie are people that, to me, seem to not understand what it's really about. This story doesn't invite demons into your soul, and it doesn't suggest you go out and do desecrations. It doesn't suggest you turn from the goodness in the world. In fact, I'd suggest it does the exact opposite. Marin gives a very solid rebuttal for this in the last act. When confronted with the question of why would a demon do this if it doesn't necessarily damn the host, I see the most clear-cut evidence for my conclusion. "Then what would be the purpose of possession?" Karras said, frowning. "What's the point?" "Who can know?" answered Marin. "Who can really hope to know?" He thought for a moment, then probingly continued, "Yet, I think the demon's target is not the possessed. It is us, the observers, every person in this house. And I think the point is to make us despair, to reject our own humanity, Damien, to see ourselves as ultimately bestial, as ultimately vile and putrescent, without dignity, ugly, unworthy. And there lies the heart of it, perhaps, in unworthiness. For I think belief in God is not a matter of reason at all. I think it finally is a matter of love, of accepting the possibility that God could love us." Again, Marin paused. He continued more slowly and with a hush of introspection. "He knows. The demon knows where to strike." He was nodding. "Long ago, I despaired of ever loving my neighbor. Certain people repelled me. How could I love them, I thought. It tormented me, Damien. It led me to despair of myself, and from that, very soon, to despair of my God. My faith was shattered." Karras looked up at Marin with interest. "And what happened?" he asked. Well, at last I realized that God would never ask of me that which I know to be psychologically impossible. That the love which he asked was in my will, and not meant to be felt as emotion at all. Not at all. He was asking that I act with love, that I do unto others, and that I should do it unto those who repelled me, I believe, was a greater act of love than any other. He shook his head. I know that all of this must seem very obvious, Damien. I know. But at the same time, I could not see it. Strange blindness. How many husbands and wives, he uttered sadly, must believe they have fallen out of love because their hearts no longer race at the sight of their beloveds. Ah, dear God. He shook his head and then nodded. There it lies, I think, Damien. Possession. Not in wars, as some tend to believe. Not so much. And very seldom in extraordinary interventions such as here. This girl. This poor child. No, I see it most often in the little things, Damien. In the senseless, petty spites, the misunderstandings, the cruel and cutting word that leaps unbidden to the tongue between friends, between lovers. Enough of these, Marin whispered. We have no need of Satan to manage our wars. These we manage for ourselves. For ourselves. The lilting singing could still be heard in the bedroom. Marin looked up at the door and listened for a moment. And yet, even from this, from evil, will come good. In some way. In some way that we may never understand or ever see. Marin paused. Perhaps evil is the crucible of goodness, he brooded. And perhaps even Satan, in spite of himself, somehow serves to work out the will of God. This book was an intense ride, but I feel like I, too, have come out on the other side of it a changed person. How? I'm not sure. Maybe one day I'll be able to pinpoint something directly. Who knows? I'm just glad I read it. If you've made it all the way here, thank you for watching. I can't really believe that I made this as a way to put off making a video about Dracula, because I really thought I'd have less to say on this than Dracula, but here we are at page 83 of the script, and several months of writing, script writing, editing, video editing. Dear God, so much. Huge shout out to right now my only patron, Meehandlebars, aka Tim. And then also thank you to Dee and to Jilly Pie, just for the general support over the years. All of you all are awesome. My Patreon, if you want to join, has art and other stuff. You can get PDFs of the books that I've written in case you want to keep Jeff Bezos out of the equation. Anyway, this is I literally I just finished editing the video, and my brain is soup. So yeah, thanks for watching. Maybe like the video, maybe subscribe. I'm around on various platforms. Yeah, I don't know. If you're feeling really wild, you could always go and like pee on a carpet and tell an astronaut he's gonna die in space. But I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye! Also, this is actually the debut for my model, so yeah, I did that, ho. That's how you debut a model. Yap for almost 2 hours about The Exorcist. That's right.